Hi folks, welcome today to lesson 1 of your resource management topic. Today's key idea is that food, water and energy are fundamental to human development. That essentially means that we need food, water and energy in order to survive and in order for our economies to grow. These three things, food, water and energy, are resources. So what we're going to be learning about today, our objectives, are that food, water and energy are vital to economic and social well-being. That's the first thing we will explore. Then the supply and consumption of these resources, so food, water and energy, is unequal globally. That means some countries have more food than others, some get more water than others, and some are producing or using more energy more than others. So we're going to have a little look at that too. Okay, there are some key terms as we go through this topic, and these are some key terms that we will use today. So just to go through them with you, a resource is a stock or supply of something that has a value or purpose. So food is a resource, and obviously it has a value, we need it, and it has a purpose, it keeps us going. So food would be a nice example. You could even say materials are a resource, and we make clothes out of them. And we get those materials from, for example, cotton that we would grow in fields on plants. You could even say when you pick up a pencil and do a graph or a chart or a drawing, that is also a resource. We've had to source wood to make the pencil, graphite to go inside the pencil, so we've mined for that, and then we've put it together as a product which we then use as a resource. So all of these things are resources. Okay, next term. Scarcity is not having enough of something. So if food is scarce, there isn't enough to go round. Surplus is the opposite. It's where we have a plentiful supply of something. So there's loads of it, enough that's left over. Production is the making of something. I just talked about a pencil. We could produce pencils using different resources to make them. Consumption is a word you're going to hear a lot of. Consumption is the using of those products or the using of those resources. So when you go to the supermarket and you buy food and you eat it, you are consuming it. When you go to Primark and you buy a new t-shirt, you are a consumer. You are buying something and you are using it. So those are some key terms today. Okay, to start off, I would like you to pause this right now and just list as many resources in life that you think humans need and use. We've already mentioned a few. See if you can add to your list. Okay, so you might have come up with all sorts of things. You might have come up with wood to make paper, different stationery items like pens and rulers and rubbers for at school. You might have talked about different metals, different irons in order to make things, bricks, stone, all sorts of different things that we can find on the planet which we can then turn into products and use. And those are resources. Now, the top three are the three we're looking at, and we've already mentioned today. So we're looking specifically at food, water, and energy. Without these three things, we can't function in life and we can't develop our economies. So these three are the top three important resources. You might have had on your list things like games consoles and Xbox 2s. Yes, they're resources, they're things that we use and play with, but they're not essential. We're looking at the essentials today. Okay, let's start with food. You might want to stop this slideshow and just think about the advantages and disadvantages of having not enough food. So pause this and think about all the possible advantages and disadvantages of that. And then do the same for having too much food, having a surplus of it, having loads of it. Pause this now and have a think. Okay, so you might have come up with something like not having enough food means that you will starve and you will go hungry. And you might have said having too much food means that you might overeat and get a bit fat. And you're not wrong, but there's a bit more to it than that. So, your health is affected by how much you eat and the food's nutritional value. The World Health Organization suggests that we need 2,000 to 2,400 calories per day to be healthy. If you're an athlete, you actually need a little bit more than that. Over 1 billion people in the world fall below this level, and they are described as being malnourished. Okay, that means they don't eat enough calories per day, and that is what malnourished means. It doesn't mean they're starving, it just means they're not getting enough to be really healthy. Now, that's quite a lot when you think about the fact that there's 7 billion people on the planet. That's a seventh of people don't get enough food. A further 2 billion people suffer from undernutrition. Another word for undernutrition is malnutrition. Now, this is a different thing. This is not not getting enough food, but this is having a really bad variety in your diet. So you might, for instance, you might be eating loads and loads of rice. You might have loads of rice, surplus of rice, so you're eating plenty of it day in, day out, but it's the only thing you're eating. So therefore, you're not getting the variety of nutrients that you need. Therefore, you are malnourished. Okay, or you're suffering with malnutrition or undernutrition. So it really means a poorly balanced diet lacking in minerals and vitamins. This can result in a range of illnesses and diseases, but it can also have economic effects. People need to be well fed to be productive at work and contribute to economic development of the country. And if you haven't got enough food and you are going hungry and you are ill, you are weak, you are just thinking about the fact that you're hungry, how are you going to be productive at work? You can't be. This is one of the reasons why we always say to students that you must have breakfast before you come to school, because otherwise you can't really think straight. You can't be productive because you're hungry. So, that's an economic effect, because it will determine how productive people can be in their place of work, and therefore how the economy of the country can grow. The opposite of not having enough food is having too much food. So being obese, being overweight. And that's an increasing problem in wealthier countries like Britain, like the United States of America, that people are consuming too much food, too much fast food, which is not really very good for you. And again, it causes problems. So to summarise, not having enough food. 1/7 of the world are malnourished. That means they don't get 2,000 calories per day. They're effectively starving. 2/7 of the world are suffering from malnutrition or undernutrition. That means they get enough food, but they have a poorly balanced diet and they lack essential nutrients. Socially, in terms of people's health, this will lead to illness, disease, and death, as their immune systems are weak. So they can get ill, they're more likely to catch diseases, and therefore they're more likely to die. So socially, that's a negative effect there. Economically, they're less productive at work because they are weak, they are ill, it might be that they can't go to work, or if they are at work, they're not really producing. So that's an economic effect. Having too much food. Your health is affected by what you eat, what you consume. Obesity is an increasing problem in wealthy nations. Our way of life is becoming more sedentary. That means we're sort of sitting around a lot, sitting in an office, doing an office job rather than moving. And we're turning to fast food for convenience, because we can pick it up at the supermarket on the way home, shove it in the oven or in the microwave, and 10 minutes later it's ready. But it's not good for you. That kind of food is full of salt. It's been preserved with lots of additives in order for it to last a long time in your fridge, and it's not very good for you. Socially and economically, it causes a strain on the health service, and people are less productive at work. Economically, causing a strain on the health service because we're having to pay for people to have treatment in hospitals for things like heart problems, because obesity leads to heart failure, diabetes, and so on. And this all costs money. It costs taxpayers money as people end up in hospital because they are overweight. Let's have a little look at the supply of food and undernourishment around the world. Here you have a picture of the world map, and you can see the really dark red areas are the percentage of the population that are undernourished, more than 35%. So more than 35% of people are undernourished. That means they are not getting enough calories. They're effectively starving. And when you look at this map, it's very, very obvious, isn't it, that if you look at Africa there in the middle, full of countries that are either dark red or the slightly lighter red, which shows more than a quarter of their populations are effectively starving. Now, those countries are sub-Saharan Africa, very, very poor countries, and they simply haven't got enough food. Whereas you look at Europe on the map and North America, and it's just yellow. You just don't see undernourishment. Generally speaking, our population, our people are not starving. So you can see it's globally, it's very unequal. And a lot of that is to do with the supply of food. So we've got plenty of food in Europe, North America, South America, plenty of food to go around, so nobody's starving. But in Africa, food is scarce, partly because of the climate and being able to grow it. Okay, let's move on. Now would be a really good time to have a go at answering these questions on your task sheet. So I think we've covered what resources are. Remember, malnourishment is different to undernutrition. Malnourishment, just to remind you, is about not having enough food, not eating enough calories, whereas having undernutrition or malnutrition is about not having the variety of food. We talked a little bit about the economic effects of undernourishment. So have a go at that question, and then using the map that we've just been looking at, I'd like you to describe the distribution of those countries where there is severe undernourishment. And then finally, question 5, I'd like you to talk a little bit about obesity. And then you can move on with the PowerPoint. Let's look at our next resource, which is water. Both the quality, that means how good it is, and the quantity, that means how much we've got. Think about how much water you've used and drunk today. Imagine if you had just one bucket of water each day, and that's to include everything, your cooking, your washing, and so on. Both the quantity and the quality of water are important for our well-being. That's how happy we are and how healthy we are, and for economic development. But water is not only essential for people and animals to drink, but it's vital for crops and food supply. It's also important as a source of power for producing energy. And as the world's population grows, more and more people are faced with a shortage of water. The two that I've highlighted in blue there are the ones that we always forget to talk about. We forget about the fact that we need a lot of water in order to make products and in order to power our homes. And it's essential for that. In fact, a huge percentage of our water gets used on producing goods and producing energy. Far more than what gets used on Earth for domestic purposes like drinking, washing, cooking and cleaning. So why do some countries have a shortage of water? There's a couple of reasons here. Let's just have a little look at the graph. You can see that this is showing the areas of water scarcity by 2025. So in 5 years' time, we can expect there to be a water scarcity. That means not enough in the following countries. Let's have a little look at the key. The green areas are showing you a physical water scarcity. In other words, there isn't enough rainfall. Their climate is such that it's dry. There isn't enough rain. There isn't enough water to go around. So North Africa, where we have the deserts, and the Middle East, where they're in the deserts, there's just not enough water. The pink areas are interesting. The pink areas are showing you economic water scarcity. That means that they get water, so there is rainfall, but they can't capture it. So my second bullet point on the slide there, they cannot afford to capture and store it, and they cannot afford to treat it. So it rains, it seeps down into the ground, it goes deep underground and is stored in what we call the aquifers, but they can't get to it. In order to build lakes and reservoirs and water systems, pipes, that requires a huge amount of money, and these countries just can't afford it. Then we've got yellow areas which show little or no water scarcity. In other words, those countries are fine, they're getting plenty of rainfall throughout the year, and they're able to capture it and store it because they've got the money to do so. So there's absolutely no problem for those countries there. So the imbalance in water supply is due mainly to variations in climate and rainfall. But rainwater does need to be captured and stored in reservoirs. or taken from rivers or from deep underground. And all of those things are very expensive and require high levels of investment. And that really explains that graph. Many of the world's poorest countries, as I've just said, particularly in Africa, have a shortage of water. They become trapped in a cycle of poverty. The United Nations estimates that by 2025 there'll probably be about 50 countries that have water scarcity, and most of that is because of economic water scarcity, not because they don't get the rain, they just can't afford to capture it. You can see that there are very big differences in how we use our water as well. Let's have a look at this slide here. So we've got two pie charts. The pie chart on the left is showing you how water is used in richer, high-income countries. And as you can see, 59%, so more than half, is on industrial use. That means in our factories, producing goods, that's where most of our water is going. And in energy, obviously energy production. Only 11% is actually used by people in their homes for washing, cooking and cleaning. And we've got 30% that are being used in agriculture. That will be watering the crops on those big sprinkler systems. Now let's have a little look at the pie chart on the right, and you can see how different it is. So these countries are low-income countries or middle-income countries, so they're much poorer. 82% though, that's a huge amount, is used in farming. And that's because a lot of people in these countries are farmers. That's the biggest their biggest source of income and their livelihoods. A lot of these people are subsistence farmers, so they're just growing food to feed themselves and their families. The domestic use is similar, 8% for washing, cooking and cleaning, and their industrial use is very, very low. And that's because these countries haven't industrialized yet. They haven't developed their industries and their factories, so they're not using so much water. So the bullet points on the right. In high-income countries, most water is used in industry. That's the production of goods and services. These are things that produce money and economic development. Whereas the pie chart on the right, in low-income countries, most water is used for farming. This does not produce as much money or economic development. So that's how water use links to income. Water use links to economic development. And you can see richer countries are using it in industry, which makes money, and poorer countries are using it in farming, which doesn't make money. So that's the link there. Okay, now's a good time for you to pause this PowerPoint and have a go at answering these next 5 questions from your task sheet. These have all been covered in the PowerPoint. Finally, let's move on to energy. Think of the energy needed in your home and school for light and heat to power things like cookers, TVs, tablets, etc. Energy is required for economic development. It powers factories and machinery and provides fuel for transport. In the past, many countries could depend on their own energy resources. Today, the situation is much more complex, with energy being traded worldwide. So we buy it, we import and we export. Energy consumption, that means using it, is increasing as the world becomes more developed and demand increases. And you can see from looking at the graph on this slide that as the years have gone on, from 1970 all the way to 2010, energy use has gone up over the graph. And that's because we've got more and more people entering the planet, and we have a demand for more and more products and things that require and use energy, like technology. If you look carefully at this graph, you can see that the world's richest countries use far more than poorer countries in Africa and the Middle East. The Middle East actually supplies much of the world's oil, yet its own consumption is relatively small. And I have a better graph to show you to show this point. As countries become more and more industrialised, that means as they become richer over time, the demand for energy will increase and patterns of energy trading will change. So just looking at this graph, you can see that the USA in 1970 was using 20% of the world's energy consumption was in the United States of America. And today, you know, if you go to 2010 or 2012 at the end of the graph there, they still consume 20% of all global energy, which is a hell of an amount. It's almost a quarter. European Union, similar. It looks to me that they use about 15% of all the world's energy is in the European Union, and that's wealthy countries. And as we go up the graph, let's go to the top, the Asia Pacific countries. If you were to look at how much they are using, it's roughly probably about 5 or 6% of all global energy. So you can see there's a huge difference there. This next graph is better. This map is better in some respects, because you can just see there, if you look at Africa, dark blue and light blue, that's how much energy they're using, less than 5, let's have a look at the units, British thermal units per person. Whereas you look at us in the UK, we are in the yellow or the orange bracket, which is 150 to 249 thermal units. Look at the United States of America, and they are red, 250 to 400 thermal units. That's how much they're using. So you can see from this map that the poorest places do not use much energy at all, whereas richer countries really do use a lot of energy. So it's unfair and it's unequal. And there's a couple of points on the left hand side. Did you know the richest 1 billion people use 50% of the world's energy? That's incredible. And energy usage links to our standard of living and economic development. We need energy. We need energy in order to power our factories, power our homes, extend our days beyond daylight hours, and that's what causes our economies to grow, whereas poorer countries that don't have the energy usage are not doing that. So wealthy countries consume far more than poor countries. Okay, and finally, there's a couple of questions there for you to reflect on and write up. Everything I've said in this PowerPoint is on the 2 handout sheets that I've attached as well into the homework. And then I'd like you to finish with a practice question, please. This is to be an extended piece of writing. It's worth 6 marks. I'll be looking for just under half a side for this question. And to finish, in conclusion, world population is growing and we are consuming more food, more water and more energy. Secondly, this means more people face a shortage if there isn't enough. Thirdly, resources are distributed unevenly across the globe. Fourthly, this imbalance is often to do with climate and the country's ability to get or capture the resources that they need. Fifthly, technology isn't improving fast enough to meet demand. And finally, low-income countries end up trapped in a cycle of poverty because they don't have these resources. Thank you. Email your teachers if you have any questions, and please be uploading your work onto Teams. If you can't upload it onto Teams, then I suggest you try contacting your teacher through email or on Show My Homework. Thank you.